The Drums of War, Chapter 40, Unbent Pacifician. Upon the depot and transit world of Azad, blood splattered across the cold floor, and Aidan Purefoy staggered against the bare, unforgiving wall again. He was not knocked off his feet, not this time. He steeled himself with another Allfather, and once more looked his captor in the eye. Aidan had gotten good at reading exarch faces over the past few months. Acolyte Lord Naku Zin was a study in alien fury. Clenched jaws, eyes narrowed, nostrils flared. It wasn't too terribly different from a human's furious expression, save that the deep scarlet was the man's natural coloring. The club clenched in the furious man's fist, whistled through the air, and crashed into Aidan's side with a meaty snap. "Kneel!" Naku Zin commanded. It was a command with no room for anything but obedience. However, Aidan served a different lord, and so another mental repetition of our father preceded him, disobeying again, looking his captor in the eye. "I kneel only to God," he said, thickly, through split lips. "Next year shall devour your beauty card," Naku Zin roared, as he swung the club underhandedly. Aidan might have flinched or twitched when this beating had begun, but drawing breath drew sharp pains. His vision was blurred by the swelling around his eyes, and 7 of his fingers and toes were bent the wrong way. Therefore, the club sailed up between his legs before connecting to the sensitive region there. It had been a favored target since his torturers had discovered how sensitive it was to impacts. White spots flashed across his vision, and the cell tilted before the club came sailing down across his shoulders. "The creator," Aidan gasped as he pushed himself off the floor on trembling arms, "of the universe," he was once more got to his feet beneath him, "cannot be toppled by a mere idol." Then, with another mental Allfather, Aidan looked Naku Zin in the eye again. An almost casual backhanded blow across the chin punctuated Naku Zin, stating, "Your alleged creator is a god of forgiveness, of weakness, of folly." If his face wasn't so swollen, Aidan would have grinned as he told him, "Only the strong have the power to forgive. You lack that power, and so does your idol." This time, Aidan felt the bony protrusions of Naku Zin's knuckles tear into the flesh on his left cheek, and a tooth came loose in his mouth. "Idiocy!" Naku Zin bellowed, as Aidan struggled to stay standing, and the club whistled through the air and connected to the beaten man's knee, sending him sprawling to the floor. Then, roaring wordlessly, Aidan's captor kicked him, and kicked him, and kicked him until the Scarlet Lord was out of breath. Then he spat an order at the scantily clad servant waiting at the door. "See that he feels our next session. I fear the pain has overwhelmed his cowardly and weak mind." Aidan lay on the floor, gasping and bleeding for a time. He really couldn't tell how long, even if everything wasn't spinning in a decidedly uncomfortable way. The cell lacked any way to mark the passage of time. The dim lights didn't even cycle. However, he did eventually feel the pain change in kind. The cuts across his torso felt blistering hot, and his bruises felt frigid. And he said a silent Hail Mary against what was coming. His ribs itched and launched stabbing pain as the poor slave girl moved the primitive heating device across where they must have been cracked, and the sensation settled into uniform dull throbbing. Then she began to set his fingers. If he hadn't remembered the tooth knocked loose, he might have swallowed it while crying out from the pain. Instead, he spat it under a large globule of blood on the floor before doing so. He gasped for breath and tried to smile at the poor girl administering the tender ministrations he was enjoying, and said, "Make sure that you get all the joints lined up right. I'll never have to get a date with crooked fingers, sweetheart." Aidan tried not to let his dismay at the girl's obvious sorrow show, and tried harder to keep the cries of pain contained as she continued to set his fingers. "Why do you persist? Do you not know you shall find no escape? Simply do as he commands, and the end shall come swiftly." "There is no escape for anybody, sweetheart. We're all mortal, and nobody gets out of life alive." "Yet you are made to suffer when you can have rest." "My soul matters to me," Aidan said as he clamped his teeth for another cry of pain. "Your soul shall be devoured, for your blood shall be spilled upon the altar." "My soul is the property of the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Commander of the skies and stars, the holy God of all, and he does not suffer theft. Aidan found himself saying with perfect honesty. His mother would be proud if she had heard. His mother would be heartbroken if she had seen. Aidan gritted his teeth against the pain of the healing device as she ran it over his fingers one by one. And then, when she was running it up his arms, as she said, "Yet the older—" "Won't matter," he interrupted. "God doesn't care when and where I die, but does care how. I refuse to die a broken traitor." "You appear broken to me." "Then why is your master so angry?" "Please keep stillness. I begin on your face." "Don't worry about making me pretty. On my world, girls love scars." Some 3 weeks ago, Aidan was feeling good about his work on this world. His network of questioners had grown far larger than on his previous assignment. And even better, they had begun to get together to discuss their questions and try to answer them together. There was a small side effect on Aidan, though. He found himself saying little prayers in his head, just in case God was listening. His mother would be disappointed in halfway truth, but Aidan wasn't quite sure what he believed these days. He was even beginning to adapt some of Christian's parables in answer to certain questions, or at least he thought he was. He wasn't completely sure he'd be getting the parables exactly right, even as simple as they were. Well, if he was going to be a missionary, he might as well do the whole spreading the gospel thing. He was also making inroads into the middle ranks, with the exarch called the Initiate Highborn, which opened the possibility of the messages of one thinking for oneself actually reaching the nobility. He didn't exactly have high hopes that a wave of independent thought would sweep through the nobility, leading to an outbreak of pacifistic philosophy. But 1 or 2 nobles who treated their slaves better would be a vast improvement. It was to that end that he was meeting Initiate Highborn to Quasner at what passed for a bar on this planet. At least that's how Aidan thought of the appointed intoxicant dealer's dingy storefront, with its collection of rickety tables, near the habitation district Aidan was currently working in. He'd never been much one for drinking, but the sorry excuses for liquor served amongst the exarch made him long for even the cheapest of CIP beers. He was getting better at pretending it didn't taste like boiled ass. Quasner entered furtively, which didn't surprise Aidan, since the Initiate Highborn didn't often mingle where the serfs were permitted to socialize. Still, it would have been more conspicuous for Aidan to ascend to the areas where the middle nobility frequented, since he had disguised himself as one of the lower class of enslaved people, so that he could cast a wider net. "It is whispered that if one questions, one should ask you," the man ironically whispered to Aidan, who was masterfully pretending that the drink didn't taste like an aforementioned boiled ass, and seated at the table. "I don't know whether I am the best to ask, but I don't turn anyone away," Aidan said with a gesture to the chair that might have once been sturdy. "I begin. How is it that you have a name?" "Why shouldn't I have one?" "Because you are a serf, or appear to be." "It could be that I am more than I appear. It could be that everyone is more than they appear." The Initiate Highborn Quasner slowly took a seat and visibly pondered the answer before asking, "What do I appear to be?" "Curious and courageous." "One mayhap, not the other." Aidan raised an eyebrow, but left the comment alone. Instead he asked, "Have you ever wondered why you deny the serfs' names?" "Such things are beyond my station." "Why?" "Because—" The man's brow furrowed in a disturbed frown. "I don't know why." "Who decided that any questions were above your station?" "The acolyte lord over me, I suppose. Or maybe the priest lord or priest master." "Who gave them the authority to keep questions away from you?" "The emperor, of course." "Where does he get his authority?" "From Xur. May the stars tremble at his steps." "Why does Xur have the authority to command such a thing?" "He is a god, and shall punish those who disobey." "What if you gave your loyalty to a different god?" "I shall be killed upon the altar and my soul devoured." "How do you know your soul would be devoured?" "The priest masters told me so." "Why would they do that?" Initiate Highborn Quasner looked deeply troubled and fell silent. Aidan left him to ponder his questions on his own. Otherwise the man's answers would belong to somebody else. Hope died when he saw a different Initiate Highborn, one he knew to be a cruel taskmaster coming straight for him as he stepped out of the shabby bar. "Warrior, is this the blasphemer?" the man asked the beaten and bleeding member of Aidan's network. Aiden felt the blood drain from his face, and in a moment of panic, he sent up a wordless, terrified silent prayer for strength. To his surprise, he got an answer. He knew that pain, suffering, humiliation, and death lay ahead of him. Well, he couldn't complain when Christ himself suffered a similar fate on the side of the mortal coil. And remembering that, he met the accusing eyes of the initiate highborn and said directly, "Xir is not a god, and I offer it no worship, nor obedience, nor deference, nor praise. I shall only call Christ my king," frankly. Aiden surprised himself with how true that was. Presently, in Acolyte Lord Nakuzin's chambers, infuriating, when there were reports and rumors of the vengeful goddess Republic had sent forth warriors of great cunning to strike in the Dominion's very strongholds, Priest Lord Nakakun was excited. As the lord over a quiet district of logistics worlds, he had thought all chance at glory in the latest conquest had passed him by, until he heard of these shadow warriors. Suddenly, even his posting was fraught with peril and the chance for glory. However, instead of the vengeful goddess Republic mocked him by sending this creature who merely spoke. Worse, the foolish coward claimed to not even serve his goddess, the lying beetle. What else could transform one of the humans into one of the Exarch but a god? Ridiculous lies. This Christ. Where was this Christ? Where were his armies, his weapons, his sacrifices? The priestesses had said nothing of a Christ, but they did say they knew not from whence the divinity of the vengeful goddess Republic flowed. No, the thing was using deception, for the goddesses wished to mock him, as if he was not worthy of one of her shadow warriors. The creature would speak of mercy, forgiveness, grace, and love, as if those were anything but the fantasies of the weak. Insanity. Worse, no matter how he beat it, or cut it, or shocked it, or burned it, it persisted in this madness. He had demonstrated the visceral fact that this alleged god called Christ would not rescue him from the pain. The fool laughed at him when he pointed out this irrefutable fact. It had been satisfying to silence the laughter with his club. "I shall attempt to educate the coward thrice more only," he said to nobody in particular. "Yes, it was a good decision, a strong decision. Someone find out about how this Christ died for sins. I believe I know how to demonstrate the weakness of the God of mercy." "I obey," an initiate highborn intoned. Acolyte Lord Nakuzin briefly considered learning his name, but dismissed the idea. In the cell, Aiden's captor had tried something new. Instead of a short, sharp argument punctuated by the crack of a whip, the impacts of a club, the burns of a torch, or the jolts of an electrical prod, Nakuzin had tried something a little more lengthy. His wrists were loosely bound by manacles made with cruel teeth along the insides of their cuffs, and a cable was run from the central link to a bolt in the ceiling, and drawn taut such that Aiden had to stand on his toes to relieve the pressure on his wrists. Then, at more or less random, a slave was ordered to beat his exposed sides and belly in silence. Blood trickled down his arms and runnels and dripped to the slickening floor, making it harder for Aiden to keep his footing. That would have been bad enough on its own, but everything between his ribs and his hips felt like a giant bruise. He likely felt that way because it was that way. Aiden's calves burned with the effort of keeping his weight on his cramping near-vertical feet. Then the door opened, and Nakuzin entered with his attendants. "Behold," the man said, as he spread out his arms so Aiden could see his intricately patterned and clean robes. "I prayed to my God for strength, and here I stand. You pray to your God, and there you hang." "And still you are not strong enough to break even Christ's weakest servant," Aiden replied with a grin. "I have asked after this Christ, and I hear of his crown. You shall forgive me. You must, for your alleged God demands it. For there is no vegetation on my world, let alone thorns. But I believe I came close. Here, let me assist you in imitating your Christ." He stepped aside, and Aiden gulped when he saw the twisted ring of jagged metal on the pillow borne by the same handmaiden who normally tended to his injuries. If Aiden had not been so exhausted from his latest torment, he might have cried out in pain when Nakuzin placed a crown on his head and twisted it. As things were, all he had the energy for was the sort of gasp. You shouldn't have," Aiden groaned as Nakuzin stepped back to admire his handiwork. I didn't get you a gift after all. I've been so tied up lately." The smug pleasure melted off Nakazin's face as he leaned forward to be nose to bloody nose with Aiden. "This can all end," he nearly whispered. "All you must do is submit. Even now you can turn away from your path and return to the light," Aiden said again, for what felt like the 1,000th time. "I've made improvements to your Christ's crown," the enraged noble hissed, and raised a small hammer in one hand and grasped Aiden's head by the ear in the other. Aiden felt a flash of pain in his skull as he saw white. His feet scrabbled in the slick blood on the floor, and the teeth of the cuff tore into his wrists. There was a cruel glitter in Nakazin's eyes as he said, "Fear not! The nails have not the length to slay you." Then he drove the second nail into Aiden's skull. "Submit, and you may die quickly." Aiden began praying to Our Father aloud. "We shall try another lesson," Nakazin said with open disgust. "Let the fools think on this lesson a while, then let it down and prepare it again." By this, he meant that Aiden would find himself spread eagle with the wadded-up tatters of his own blood-soaked shirt tied into his mouth under a sack hood, which also happened to be under a stream of icy water, which started and stopped unpredictably. It was likewise with the electric shock sent coursing through his body. Aiden hadn't even the slightest clue how he stayed sane through the pain, the shivering cold, and the terror of drowning. He wasn't strictly certain that he had stayed sane. He heard the creak of the door opening and the dull, certain thumping of Nakuzin's boots. The hood snapped off his head. "Shall you submit?" Aiden mumbled into the gag between his teeth. Nakazin made an irritated sound before he made a motion, and the attendant removed the gag so Aiden could splatter and cough in response. "Where is your God? Where is your Christ? Where is the love and mercy? I'll tell you, it's all false. You stand there under my love and mercy and call them false. You really aren't clever at all," Aiden coughed. "You lay under my power," Nakazin sneered and produced a tall ewer. "There is nothing about you outside my hands." The noble slowly tipped the ewer over Aiden's face, and a cold, congealing, sanguine liquid spilled out and splashed into the bowed man's nose and into his mouth. The blood tasted coppery. Aiden struggled to wriggle out of the stream of blood, but Nakazin assuredly made certain that he could not with the casual grace. Once the ewer was empty, Aiden sputtered, "Come on, that's just gross. Submit, and it shall end. You might as well get the next jug." And so he did it again, and did it again, and did it again, until Aiden was shivering in a puddle of cold blood on the floor. He tried not to think about how many people had to die to provide for the Lord's sadistic little game. He tried to ignore the nails in his skull, and tried to find peace despite it all. The closest he could come was praying as much of the rosary as he could remember. Sometime later, Nakuzin returned with a large metal cross carried by 6 strong-looking men. "Here again, I help you imitate this Christ," the nobleman sneered. "Here is the cross he commands of you." Aiden was spent. He had nothing to say, but he knew what he had to do. He was released, and though he was stiff and sore, he stood with quiet dignity and took up his cross. He bore it through the twisting warrens of the prison and up and down stairs, across balconies, and through staring crowds full of piteous and hostile eyes until they reached their destination, a blood-stained sacrificial altar. "Here is your choice, fool. Die quickly as one of the faithful to exhort. May the stars tremble at his steps. Or I shall personally pin you to this cross and put up a valve in your vein, such that I can bleed you dry over the next day and a half." "I am the open hand," Aiden wheezed. "Know that Christ also has a closed fist, and in that fist he wields just a sword. So be it. Your soul shall be devoured in either case," Nakazin spat with fury. If everything didn't hurt so terribly, Aiden might find the fact that they stood his cross upside down once he'd been pinned to it, like an exceptionally unlucky butterfly. They probably thought that it was an insult. "Our Father," Aiden wheezed as he watched his life drip away, "withhold the cup of wrath from these lost children. They do not know what they do." He repeated the prayer as long as he could, and meant every word of it. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.